The first thing is that innovation is not about just some superstar, genius-like individual, but the fact is, and this is what I saw in these companies that I observed, anyone can innovate. Whenever I walk into a company or a training on innovation, as soon as we talk about innovation, I feel that the word itself, the word innovation as a noun, is very intimidating. But when I accidentally started to use the verb form to innovate, or innovating, I discovered that suddenly, the tension in the room would dissipate. And the reason why is that innovating does not refer to an outcome.
The prevailing way to think about innovation is usually to give it a home. An R&D department, an innovation unit, a product or technology team, one place where the mandate to innovate is supposed to live. That model has been under pressure for the past few years. A friend of mine, Hans Bellmaker, recently profiled a handful of corporate innovation leaders whose units were eliminated. One of them got a call on a Sunday while he was still on holiday. His venture studio, more than 100 people gone in a single sentence. None of the 4 people that he featured in the story landed in the innovation role again. One went into go-to-market strategy at a software company. One became an advisor at a startup. The other one became a freelance advisor to a nonprofit project in rural Kenya. Different industries, different titles, same discipline traveling with them. That tells me something that I have believed for a long time, and that is that innovation is not a department that you can eliminate on a Sunday. It is an adjacent skill, portable across roles and organizations, whether commercial, government, or nonprofit. Each one of these organizations can build that innovating capability and distribute it across every single level by design. Which means that the real question is not whether to centralize innovation or distribute it, but the real question is, how do you design an organization so that that capability lives in many people, in many roles from the get-going? So it cannot be ended in a single call. That is the question that Ben Bensaou has spent his entire career answering. Ben is a professor of technology management and professor of Asian business and comparative management at INSEAD. His research focuses on how organizations build the capability to innovate, how they cultivate their internal social capital within the firm, and how digital technologies reshape what innovation can look like. Ben is also the author of Built to Innovate, a framework grounded in the belief that I also share, that organizations need to both execute and innovate, and that this is not the work of one unit. Ben has done the work of naming the roles, the behaviors, and the decision choices that make a distributed model real, durable, and built to last beyond a leadership change. I'm Iliriana Kachaniko, your host, and this is Activate Innovation Lounge, a podcast dedicated to all the leaders with or without innovation, entitled Passionate and Curious about Activating Internal Innovators, Generating Internal Innovations, and Building Internal Innovation Capabilities that last. If this sounds like you, follow us wherever you get your podcast. And now let's welcome Ben Bensaou. Ben Bensaou, bienvenue à mon podcast. I hope I said this correctly in my limited French, because I love being able to greet my friends in their native language. So thank you so much for coming to the podcast today. As I shared with you earlier, I recently had a chance to read your book, Built to Innovate, and I really, really loved everything that you have shared there, because I really believe that every organization should build that innovating engine. So I'm so excited to be able to unpack that with you today. So before we continue or dive into the conversation, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience in your own words. So who is Ben Bensaou?
D'abord, bonjour, Iliriana. Good morning for you. It's good afternoon for me. I'm joining you from Paris, not Paris, from Fontainebleau, near Paris. Yeah, Fontainebleau, where INSEAD is located. So yes, I'm French. I'm a professor at INSEAD Business School. For those who don't know, um, and yes, I mean maybe let me maybe kind of to link it to the topic that we're dealing with. Maybe kind of say maybe a few things that will help the audience understand where I'm coming from and what are those experiences in my life that
Yes,
have
please.
kind of shaped my intellectual journey, if you will, my thinking. So as I said, I'm French, and I was initially trained as an engineer. So that had a very big impact into the way I look at the world, if you will. So this was my initial training in civil and mechanical engineering. And then I went to Japan, and this is another big influence for me. I went in Japan in the early 90s, and I studied there, and in particular I did some work looking at the time at the Japanese style of management. So this was I had no management background before that. So when I studied management, I started by looking at Japanese management, and this is where I learned everything about, the Japanese capabilities along quality and along production, and their obsession with processes. So I think this had a deep impact on my thinking and what I found in my research. I mean, we can talk about it, because there's a clear link for me, between the quality movement, the incremental, the process innovation, movement in Japan, and what I've been able to actually observe more recently. And the third experience for me, was actually to after getting interested in the production system in Japan. I went to the US. I went to continue my interest on Japanese management, but this time in the US at MIT. And there, what I learned was much more about research, how to conduct research, how to do this with very rigorous methodology. And these are the three kind of big influences for me. And this is how, to a certain extent, I got interested in innovation after looking at Japanese management style. Yeah.
So was that Kaizen management style?
Absolutely. So this was fabulous. I was in the middle of it when the whole world was trying to understand how the Japanese do it. So it was fascinating, and I was really impressed by what they were able to do in terms of Kaizen, in terms of cost control, in terms of production capability. But then when I was in the US, there was a little bit of a puzzle. In spite of all what we were trying to learn from the Japanese companies and the Japanese economy, there was still one area where they were not teaching us anything, and this was innovation. I mean, they have been able to become a very strong economic power, and their companies, invaded markets all over the place in the U.S., in Western Europe. But when you looked at their innovation, it was not the type of innovation that you see in the U.S. System, and this is where I started to actually become intrigued. And became interested in innovation. Is why is it that Japanese firms don't have the same ability to do innovation the same way as the US, like the disruptive type?
Okay.
So this is what really got me interested in that, and this is how I started to be eager to look at all these companies around the world that were known to be very innovative.
So what was your perception of innovation before the US experience and after. What was your perception of innovation when you were seeing happening in Kaizen style in Japan versus the disruptive style in US? Did your definition of innovation change then? Or what
My
you saw as
definition,
innovation?
what my, okay, so just to keep the chronology here, my interest was like a disappointment of the Japanese in terms of their ability to innovate in the sense of create something that, a new science. Whenever there's a science that exists or a product that exists, they're very good at pushing it to the next limit. But creating
Okay.
something like a science or creating a field that did not exist before is very difficult for them. And actually, I did do some work on trying to understand this at the institutional level. But this is not, I think, the topic for this today. But
It's
what
okay.
I became, but we can talk about it again. But what was really interesting is when I tried to say, okay, why can't the Japanese do disruptive? Then I started to, and this is how my research, took almost 15 years looking at companies around the world, broadening to around the world in different industries, small and medium-sized enterprises, private and
Mhm.
public. I also looked at government agencies, and I was looking, this is what is interesting, and I was looking for how people did disruptive innovation or not, or what were the blocks for that, or the barriers for them to do this. And this is where I came across a completely different phenomena, which was I came across some companies that had transformed themselves into becoming more innovative, but they were not creating disruptions, but they were extremely innovative. And when I started to look at these companies, I realized that many of them, they were old, traditional companies, very established companies that were operating in quite kind of old, almost boring kind of industries and
Mm.
businesses. And that's where I had this moment of, I was looking for disruption, and I found that actually there are other ways of innovating. That
Okay.
you can find companies that are extremely innovative, but they have a very different approach to innovation. It's very continuous and very systematic, if you will. And this is where, if you want, Build to Innovate kind of was born because I identified these companies, and some of them, I mean, I can tell you examples of, like, this Finnish company called Fiskars, 400-year-old company, and they were able to enter, completely new businesses, new markets, and their approach to innovation was based on a very systematic and continuous approach to innovation. They were not disrupting the businesses where they were entering, but they were creating. I mean, a good definition for me of innovation is they were creating value for a customer, and they were creating value for the company, but they were not disruptive. So this is how I became interested in, not necessarily the high tech and the sexy startups
Mhm.
that we hear about, but I was really intrigued about understanding how do these long established 400-year-old, 200-year-old companies were able to literally transform themselves into major innovation powerhouses. And this is what basically Build to Innovate is about.
And that is very impressive because I remember reading the case in the book, and I was like, sometimes I think that one of our best ways to learn about innovation is to start digging on the origin of some products that we use and we take them for granted, like the scissors of Fiskars.
Yes.
And to
Yeah.
learn that's a company that has survived centuries is an absolute mind-blowing phenomenon, because we see like smaller companies, younger companies, even not existing companies that have existed in the past, especially because of being disrupted by the new incumbents. And like for me, like my journey is like always real, like coming into the very non-innovation loaded, non-innovation narrative space into the into the industry where I am now, but then also recognizing that you don't necessarily have to be a corporation in order to innovate, but you can be a not-for-profit, you can be a philanthropy.
Absolutely.
And in fact,
Absolutely.
in that international development work, we used to innovate regularly because we're addressing the shortages in the ecosystem or in the market. We're creating value that does not exist, except that we're not recognizing it as innovation. So that's how I came to the conclusion.
Absolutely.
It really comes down to the human, to the individual, and then to just equipping people with the right mindset and right tools and build this engine that will continuously innovate. So that's why it was music to my ears when I came across that in the book. But then I wanna go back to the premise of the book and dive a bit deeper. And one thing that stood out in the book for me is that you recognize that innovation is not a responsibility that needs to be embedded to one single unit, the R&D or the innovation unit, or the product, the technology, or the design unit, which we see very often now in corporations and organizations, but you see that distributed across all the organization. So for starters, you see two sides of a corporate coin: the execution and the innovating side, the execution engine and innovating engine. From your learning, how does innovating engine work?
So just to kind of tell you the typical story when I address people on innovation or try to train people on innovation, I typically ask, what comes to mind when you hear the word innovation, and the typical answer is about Elon Musk and Apple and Steve Jobs, and so there's always this association of innovation with very often an individual, genius-like individual, and some disruptive new breakthrough product or disruptive new business model. So what I found is that this narrative, a lot of people who are not even in high-tech businesses, this is their narrative of innovation. They think that innovation is genius-led, and it's disruptive. But I kind of remind them, again, it's fantastic if you have a genius in the company, and then they start to think about their own CEO, and they wonder. And not every innovation is about disruption. And in fact, genius-led and disruptive innovation is fantastical, but it is very hard. It's very hard to do. And this is how, by looking at companies like Fiskars, and, you read also about BASF, Bayer, I realized that we need a different way to think about innovation. And the first thing is that innovation is not about just some superstar, genius-like individual, but the fact is, and this is what I saw in these companies that I observed, anyone can innovate.
Absolutely.
Anyone can innovate. Anyone who actually has and we can talk about how you build this, but anyone even at the front line who is able to immerse themselves into the world of their customer, they can see things. And this is why, we're going to come back to this, frontline employees are the ones who are, on a daily basis, experiencing the customers. And I also insist on the non-customers. They see the pain points, they see the wishes, they see the likes of the customers. So anyone can innovate. And then again, I show people examples from Fiskars, like they entered a completely new business. They are in, like you said, in cutting tools, but they entered the water hose business. This is not their business, but they actually did a very deep ethnographic study of their customers, their home gardeners, and realized that watering was an essential task for them. So they found a new problem. So very often people think that innovation is about problem solving. I think another big part of innovation is problem finding a new problem that you can solve for your customer. And I think the people who are best equipped or best positioned for that are the frontline people. So I think, just to kind of highlight the like 3 or 4 pillars of this narrative that is associated with execution engine and innovating engine is that first, anyone can innovate. Second, you can innovate in everything you do. You can innovate, like you were saying, you can innovate in products, you can innovate in your processes, internal processes, external processes. You can innovate in a function. HR can be innovated, IT, logistics. As long as it has a customer, then you can think about how can we create superior, value for this customer and benefit to the company. So, and the third pillar I would say is that innovation, actually, I'm going to explain the distinction between innovation and innovating, but innovation, so anyone can innovate. You can innovate in everything you do, and innovating or to innovate has to become a habit. It has to be something that people do, on a regular basis. Not only when we have a crisis and we have to, find a new idea. It is something that is a regular part of everybody's job. It is part of everybody's job. I mean, it's not like it. Okay, so let me make the distinction about innovation and innovating, because I think it will illuminate the rest of the conversation. Huh? But that again, I came across this distinction almost by accident. I had noticed that whenever I walk into a company or training on innovation, as soon as we talk about innovation, I feel that the word itself, the word innovation as a noun, is very intimidating, especially for people who are at the front line. And even, the people who come to a training, they have this belief that their boss is expecting them to come up after the training. They have to come up with a breakthrough, product or discover a new market space. And that creates a lot of stress and a lot of tension. But when I accidentally started to use the verb form to innovate, or innovating, I discovered that suddenly, the tension in the room would dissipate. And the reason why is that innovating does not refer to an outcome, to a result. If you say, if you ask randomly people, give me an idea of, give me an example of innovation, they will almost systematically give you a name of a product or a process, a product or an outcome, the result. And if you walk into a room and say, okay, we're going to do innovation, we're going to learn how to do innovation, people immediately assume that you're expecting them to come up with a product or a result.
Or a breakthrough technology.
The technology angle is always there, But if you say, let's innovate, then people understand that innovating is about activities, or it's about behaviors. It's a process. It's about it's a process that can be learned, and the process can be supported by tools. And then as soon as people understand that, then the whole fear, the whole tension disappears. And I think this is so. I don't know if it can help, but there's a metaphor that I use a lot. The famous iceberg metaphor. So if you think about the iceberg, if innovation is the peak, the impressive peak rising above the the water, then innovating is what happens underneath the water level. It's the collective individual capability of everyone in the organization. And this capability is just waiting to be tapped. So
Yes.
Innovating, for me, is I have a working definition of innovating is simply about looking for new ideas with no guarantee as to what you find. The only restriction is that the idea has to create value for a customer, and the customer can be internal or external, and it has to create value for the organization. And basically, you need to do this on a systematic basis, on a regular basis. So innovating, so I'm much more, so I tell people in the class, I tell them I hate the word innovation. I just say, I hate the word innovation. It is so intimidating. It's so frightening to people. And people start, waving their hands and say, but I'm not a creative type. I'm not. But as soon as you say, no, we're talking about, a process, and the process is structured and it's supported by tools. And then people realize that innovating, not innovation, innovating can be learned.
Absolutely.
And then they're very willing to try their hands at it. So now the innovating engine, the innovating engine is about how do you create a space and time where people can do innovating as part of their job. So you see, the usual view of innovation is that it is either, the domain of the senior leaders, or you have some specialist function. It could be R&D for technology, it could be new product development, or it could be like, people from outside, consultants, or like we were talking about it, open innovation, you outsource the innovation, but people don't see this as being part of their job. So I think building the innovating capability of an organization to tap into it and to capture it, you need to create something which I called engine, just to signify that it has to be something very concrete. It's not just like, I want you to innovate. No. It has to be something very concrete, like with its own governance structure, some unit that is recognizable. It is something that has processes, and it is like, a very concrete, fully legitimized, space and time where every employee is not only given permission, but is encouraged to participate, to engage in some form, some form of innovating activity. We're not asking them to deliver something. We want them to participate in some activity. It could be simply be, like, of course, these innovating projects typically are multidimensional. They are like cross-functional. So just to be the finance guy who represents the financial dimension in an innovation team, for me, takes innovating activity. You're participating in innovating activity. You're just the finance person who brings that perspective into the team. So I think this is, if you don't create that space formally, and if you don't have somebody to overlook it, and if you don't have built-in processes, then it's not going to happen. People will do it maybe 1 month, 2 months, because there was like, a speech by some senior leader or something, and then it is going to fade away. I think you need to make it very formal, very concrete, and I can give examples actually of that if you want.
I would love examples, but before we go on the examples, I want to take back to a few of the comments on what you shared. First of all, the reason why using the term innovating resonates with me is that you recognize the agency in every person that works in your organization to have on the innovating. While when you use innovation,
I like that. I like
our jargon, then we really make it a responsibility of somebody else. And then when you build the system, when everybody can engage in innovating, regardless of the scope and the function, then you definitely set the foundation for that strong engine. And as you said, there needs to be somebody to start setting up this engine if it does not succeed. And in my opinion, it's like the best starting point is always with frontline employees, because as Professor Rita McGrath teaches us, they are the first one to sense that snow melts from the edges.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Absolutely.
they are the first ones to pick the new signals that come from the current customers.
Yes.
Whether their new customers are coming, old customers are leaving, preferences are changing, behaviors are changing. Tickets, the customer tickets can always capture a tremendous amount of knowledge and intel. I call it innovation intel to work with.
Yes.
But still people will capture tacit knowledge, the unspoken knowledge that can be valuable for the organization. So what I would love to learn from you is that, because in the book we see very well established organizations cultivating their own engine, and I'm using the term cultivating because it's not a stagnant development. You need to continuously build it and oil it. And so how do you start building an engine first, but then how do you start like to engage the frontline employees, frontline innovators in innovating process in a productive and effective way, especially if you do not have these established, but you are a CEO of a, say, like 200, 500 employees working for you, and you want to start building this engine from scratch.
So in terms of building the engine, it can be built. I mean, most of the time, most of the observations I've made is that it's built top down, but I've seen examples where it was bottom up. So it's but most of the cases are top down, and just to to jumpstart it, as you rightfully say, I mean, the fuel that comes into the engine has to come from the front line. So now, to get the front line, they understand their execution job. I mean, they fully understand what I call the tyranny of the execution engine. So they understand their job, they understand the task, they understand the KPIs, they understand everything, right? And they have a tendency to, they want to keep their job, they want to do well, so they're very compliant, if you will, in terms of the execution job. So to get them to innovate, I think there are three things that are important. First, they need to feel that they have permission.
I love that.
That is, they have permission. I mean, it's like, and when I, ask senior leaders, people don't realize that if you don't give them permission, guess what? They're not going to innovate because they don't think it's part of their agenda. They have a job description and they're very good at doing it. They're being trained for that, by the way. So they went to school sometimes to execute this job. So they walk in, and for them, the world is the execution. They might be very innovative and very creative outside of the office. And as soon as they walk into the building or the plant or the office, they turn off. They turn off this innovating capability because they don't think it's allowed, or they don't think it's expected from them. So people underestimate this importance of, and we can talk about who should do that, but let me very quickly say, it should first come from very, very senior leaders, that, innovation is important. It's at the core of our strategy, and we want your innovation. And then, of course, the people who more directly have to give them permission is the middle managers. And we'll certainly talk about the middle managers. So frontline people, they have to feel, and it has to be, Illyriana, it has to be sincere. You just don't say, oh, I want your innovation. It has to be sincere, because they feel it. They feel it. They feel if you're just doing it lip service, or if you are really giving them permission. And do you want my ideas? Do you want my ideas? And how do you? So I discovered a very subtle thing. People talk about culture. But in Japan, I discovered a manager. I studied, I trained, and then I studied. I did some research on his company, and I discovered he did something that completely changed the attitudes of people in his team. Whenever
What did he do?
whenever people gave him an idea, or just mentioned an idea in the meeting, he would kind of emphatically say, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me your idea." And then when I interviewed him and I said, "But why do," because people had noticed there was something strange about him systematically saying thank you when they had an idea to share with him. And then he explained to me that people, when they are in the execution engine, they know that the boss knows what their job is. The boss has full visibility on how well they're doing their job. I mean, he can even have direct KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to ideas, there's the boss doesn't have any visibility on what ideas you have in your head.
No.
Right? And even more so, they might have a lot of ideas, but they are afraid of expressing them. And because, what are my boss are going to say? Are people going to laugh at me? And if the idea doesn't work, is it going to come back and haunt me, or am I going to get punished? This notion of psychological safety. So he said to me, people, when they come to me or in a meeting and share an idea, he realized they're taking a big risk. They're taking a big risk. As long as you do your job and you do your task, you're not taking a risk, right? But if you express an idea from nowhere, nobody asks you, and you express an idea, you are taking a personal risk. So he said, this is very profound for me. Huh? He said, I realize that when people come to me with a new idea, they are giving me a gift. They're making me a gift because they're taking a big risk. And he said, in my culture, when somebody gives me a gift, I say thank you. And I think, whether people want to do that or not, but at least in the spirit, in their mind, they should feel that when somebody, frontline person comes to them, the person should realize that not only they have permission to do that, they are encouraged to do that. And then when they do this, so the first one, they have to feel that they have permission.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, they need to learn how to do it, because people will be excited and they'll have lots of ideas. As soon as you ask people to submit their ideas, they'll submit all sorts of ideas, but then it dries out because they don't know how to look for ideas. So they need to be, I call it, they need to be capable. They need to be trained. They need to be given a few tools to learn. I mean, it's fine to observe the customer, but there's something about what I call listening to the voice of the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, because very often people don't know to listen with empathy. Very often when they listen to the customer, they're looking at the customer as somebody that they want to convince to engage or to buy a product. So they're not listening really. So they need to have some introductions to be trained in listening to the voice of the customer. But then there's some other layer which they need also to be trained, is to listen to what I call, metaphorically, the silence of the customer. The things that the customer doesn't say. And the customer doesn't talk about it, either because they don't realize of the need they have, or this is something I discovered, they might know about it. They might know that they have a need, but they don't think that the company's job is to fix that. But if you solve, I always tell people, in a class, if you solve a problem for a customer, a problem they don't think it's your job to fix it for them, but you do it nevertheless, then they will love you. So there are a few examples of companies that solve a problem, and this is where design thinking, for instance, is brilliant, because it looks at the whole journey. So you see what happens before and after the customer engages with the product. So you can unlock some value for the customer just before they touch the product. But that is brilliant because they don't expect you to do that. So, so this is what I wanted to say is that, Frontline, they need to feel that they have to have permission. They need to feel capable, which means they need to be trained, and they need to be motivated. And to motivate them, you need to recognize them. You need to acknowledge when they do it. And this is where, this notion of accepting failure that is being learned from, and just telling people how proud you are of them submitting their ideas. So this is how you jumpstart the engine. You have to get the front line to generate these ideas. So this is, you remember I call this the creation process.
Creation, yeah.
But then all of these ideas are bubbling up all around the organization. So you need to connect these ideas, because we already know that some of the most brilliant products or processes that we have out there, they're not monolithic. They don't come monolithically like one idea. They are a combination. They're made of ideas that come from different parts of the organization. So we need to connect these ideas that are bubbling around the organization. You need to connect the ideas. You need to connect the innovators together, to create a community. You need to connect them to resources. So we need this, and the people who need to do this really are the middle managers. So for me, the middle managers are really key. Number one is giving that permission. And, I noticed you reacted to it with sincerity. They have, there's a practical thing for the middle manager. Huh? You remember, right? I mean, they are held responsible for execution.
And
right?
they are masters of execution.
They are masters,
That's
but because
in those roles for.
Yes, and I mean that's their job description, and that's how they are incentivized too. So this is where we can be starting to tweak the incentive structure for middle managers. But what is ironical is that they are in the best position in the organization to give the permission to the front line to bring the ideas to them. They are the ones who are at the right elevation in the organization to be able to connect. Frontline, it's not as powerful to connect as a middle manager or even like, their direct reports, So you need that. You need to generate ideas. Then these ideas need to be connected. And then these ideas have to kind of challenge the frame. What is the mission? What is the purpose of the organization? And for this, you need somebody, and it's usually senior leaders, who, number one, establish innovation as core strategy, as core to the organization. They have to create this governance structure we're talking about, and I'll give you an example of that if you want. And they are the ones who, for instance, provide the funding. They are the ones who sponsor initiatives. But they are the ones who, more importantly, I call them reframing, chief reframing officers. Chief reframing officers. So they are the ones who actually create the frame. And to innovate, you need to expand the frame or change the frame so that the rest of the organization looks for new ideas. I think for this, I have a great example that can really illuminate, what I mean by that. This is a CEO of a company. It happens to be a Turkish company and they manufacture a commodity product. It's a product they used to manufacture. I mean, they still do. They manufacture fabric that is used to reinforce tires. So you have the valve, then you have this reinforcement fabric, and then you have the rubber. So they were a commodity player for years and years and years. And, this is a commodity product. This is sold on price, competitive very competitive market. You can't differentiate the products besides price. And then, so I happened to know him, trained his teams, trained him in innovation. And then one day he decided, he became CEO. When I met him, he was CTO, Chief Technology Officer. Then he became COO, and then he became CEO. And then he was a firm believer in innovation. As a CEO, he used to conduct innovation training.
Amazing.
He would tell me, can you give me your material, give me your slides, I'm going to train. He was training people. And one day he came back and he said, he changed the logo of the firm. He said, he changed the logo, he changed the mission of the firm. He said, we're not simply making reinforcing material for tires. We are the reinforcer. We are the company that changed completely. He said, the purpose of the company is to provide reinforcing solutions to anybody who needs reinforcing solutions. And this is how he opened the frame. So the frame was really tires. He opened the frame and they entered the construction business. Then they entered the electronics business, and they entered the aerospace business. They have some of their composite materials in SpaceX, of all places. So you see how, as a CEO, he completely opened up the mission of the company, and he was telling the company, now come and tell me what ideas do you bring from the ground up, to innovate within this bigger frame, this bigger, mission. So here I just wanted,
how does this CEO source ideas from his employees? And then how does this CEO support these employees to turn those ideas into testable prototypes or MVPs to validate the assumptions that those ideas are solving something?
Okay, so they have very formal processes and units. So you see, for me, there's a very simple little audit. When I get engaged with a company, they want to become more innovative. I do what I call a small audit. So I ask them if I can interview 15 to 20 people randomly in the organization, and I ask a very simple question. I ask them, if you had an idea or if you wanted to innovate, where would you go? Would you know where to go? Right? And then in the most typical places, people say, oh, no, I'm not, I'm not a creative type, or it's not part of my job. Why don't you go talk to the R&D guys, or, some specialized unit within the company? But these companies I'm talking about, those that created an innovating engine, if you ask them, where would you go? They know exactly where they would go, who would be the innovation coordinator at their local level. They would know where is like the training units if you want to become more, develop your skills in innovating in a new technique. You would know where to find, the training unit, or you would know as a middle manager, you would know where to get and fetch some internal coach that could come and support your team. Because middle managers, they're not trained in innovation. They don't know. No. They're ready to give permission and create time and space for some of their staff to be engaged in innovation or innovating project, but they need somebody to coach the team or to help the team through the whole process. So this is what these organizations do. So I'll give you an example, and then if you want, I can eliminate again with this fabric companies, because they did something very similar. But I think people might know more about a company called Bayer. I think in English you call it Bayer, right? What they did, it's very interesting. First, let's establish that everybody knows Bayer. I mean, they invented aspirin,
Correct.
Has a fantastic track record and a long history of scientific achievements through their R&D capability. So they have a fantastic R&D capability. But what I gathered is that in 2014, the board decided to create a separate organization on top of R&D, a separate organization to tap into and leverage the innovating capability of the 100,000 employees within Bayer. So let me just kind of tell a few elements of what they did. First, they made the whole board. They started with one board member, and it was a bit limiting. So they made the whole board responsible for innovation.
Whole board.
So the whole board. So you can imagine the kind of signal it is telling the organization about how important innovation. So every board member was responsible for innovation in their own capacity. Then to support the board in this activity, they identified 80 senior executives, very high level, across different regions, all the regions of the group, along all the key functions, global functions of the group. And these 80 people were called innovation ambassadors.
Okay.
And they were supporting the board. And what they would do, they would spend most of their time advocating for innovation, spending their time with middle managers, training them when necessary, supporting them, sponsoring initiatives. So really, there was no ambiguity about, innovation being core to Bayer, and having some, wherever you are, you have senior level people who are, advocating for this. Then what they did, they trained and certified 1,000 coaches who were then activated across the whole organization. So you can see wherever you are in the organization, and it's actually the way it works. It's that it's a bootstrapping process. So you have this initially trained and certified people, small unit, who then when they go and support a local team doing an innovation, it could be in a product, it could be a marketing innovation, it could be an internal innovation in HR. When they go, they typically train one person locally in the team. And I see this myself. I do quite a bit of that. People, sometimes I work with companies, they say, okay, we want to train, let's say 25 coaches, and then we train these people over 3 to 4 months, and they do a real life project. But then at the end of that, let's imagine we have 20, 25, 30 participants. Typically, I find that between 7 and 10 of them, they get it. They get it. They get the tools, they get the process, and they're very motivated, they're very excited. And these people, they become an internal resource. So then they can go. So this is how they build this 1,000 of internal coaches within Bayer. And then one last thing, because we're going to talk maybe about technology at some point. What they did is that they created a platform. They have a big electronic platform, but with multiple chapters. But one of them is called We Solve.
Okay.
So they have another one which is called We Ideate, but they had one which was the most successful one was We Solve. And any employee within Bayer across the whole, any country, any business unit can post on We Solve a problem that they're dealing with. And, through that, invite any suggestions, ideas from the rest of the organization. So this is based on problems. And what they showed me some of the statistics. Number one, very quickly they had 40,000 people who had participated, on We Solve, either posting a problem or making a suggestion. But the most impressive statistic they showed me is that they realized that two-thirds of the best ideas that were provided came from a business unit or a function different from the one where the idea was posted in the first place.
Why I'm not surprised? Why I'm not surprised?
You see, this is fantastic because for me, it is a validation that they were tapping ideas from all across the organization.
And this is like an absolutely beautiful proof. And I would love to talk to somebody from Bayer as well, because if we can consider horizon to the adjacent industries externally, that the best solutions come from adjacent industries, why not the best solutions cannot come from an adjacent function inside the company? And especially when companies grow large, like 10,000, 5,000, 20,000, 100,000, how long, like that becomes like that internal crowd, a collective of knowledge and tacit knowledge, experiences, that if you wanted to build that outside, then it would take you years. Think about like Innocentive. They have hundreds of thousands of people in the platform, which is fantastic. But how long it took them to build that crowd? And then the crowd on open crowd platforms, they are very diverse crowd. Of course, you tap onto geographic knowledge that you would not necessarily tap inside. But like before you go so far externally, why don't you check what do you already have inside? Because probably there is talent that is already there, that all you need is like a spark to activate that knowledge that is there. Because you probably did not manage to capture all the talents, all the passions, all the knowledge that the person had when you interviewed them for a job and decided to make them the offer. Probably left out a lot, and then the job description that's pure functional probably leaves a lot. But when you create opportunities like this, then you create that space for people to bring their full self to problem solving. Because when we start solving problems like this, we don't become selective like, oh, I'm not putting my graphic designer, my fashion designer, my artistic, my culinary hat on, but you literally get activated like, what is the best thing that I could do to solve this problem and help this employee, this colleague, or that customer over there? So, like, you got me excited already to share this idea. Now, I would love to see more companies doing like that and leveraging that treasure of knowledge that is already inside and cultivating that from the very beginning. So I would love to see more examples of Bayer being replicated elsewhere.
Oh, you have other forms. I mean, they did it that way, but I've seen like some other organizations. I mean, the one I was mentioning about the Kordsa, the fabric one.
Yes.
The CEO, Cenk Alpert, he actually. So this was only one company in a conglomerate of 20-something companies. So he actually ended up being I mean, I think his innovating capability allowed him to actually grow the business so that he became the head of the industrial group, and then he became the CEO of the whole holding. And then what he did is that what he had experimented in building the Innovating Engine at this, little fabric, manufacturing company, he translated it into the big organization, and he created an Innovating Engine across a whole group. So just the three elements that to give you a sense of how they. I want to insist on this. That this is, we're talking, when I talk about the Innovating Engine, this is something very concrete. This is not just some senior leader making presentations. So you have people within the whole structure who have, of course, everybody has the execution job, right? They have a title, but you have a few people who have a dual hat, which is that they have their execution job, but they're also responsible for some, coordinating or structuring the Innovating Engine. So you see, this is what we were talking about. You have two engines, and these two engines function parallelly at the same time. So the way you structure it is that you have some people who are responsible, for an execution task, but they're also kind of, responsible for innovating. So like you saw with Bayer, the board was also responsible for innovation. So in this company, what they did is that they would this conglomerate, they created systems and units where any employee could apply to engage in the process. So let me tell you the three most important ones. One was they call it X Lab. It's an academy. So it's an internal academy where people can learn all sorts of things, but you can learn about innovation. So if you submit, you have an 18 weeks, I think, program. And to join that program, you just need the approval from your direct report, your GM, and from HR. And then you're on. And anyone in the whole, group can apply for that. Frontline, and anybody. Then these people get trained into, innovating, in my language. They learn some methodologies, some techniques for innovating. And then actually part of that, they do a project with a team. So this is one structure. This is very formalized. So this is bottom up, right? And then they have another structure, which is top down, which is called X teams, which is the executive committee generates, plans for 5 years, and they have like some major themes that they want to, they want to enter a new industry. Like, for instance, they wanted to enter the healthcare business, or they wanted to enter the energy business. So then they ask people to volunteer to be part of X teams. These are 10-member teams. These teams are supervised by a member of the executive committee, and they have time that is allocated. So the middle manager who is supervising them knows that they're part of the X team. This is very glorifying experience. And they have time that is protected to work on this big project for a board member. And then this is the most impressive one for me. So these are structured. You ask people in the company randomly, they would all know what is X Lab and what is X Team. But there's another one which is actually blew my mind. It's an initiative called ARF, ARF, almost ready to fly. So here again, anyone can submit a proposal if you're HR and your GM agrees. So again, you see the role of middle managers here, right? Then you can make a proposal for a startup. You can work with a team and make a proposal
for an startup. An internal startup.
No. You can make a startup, the startup that you want, even if the startup has nothing to do with the business.
Okay.
So then they have some time to work on this proposal, and they submit it to a committee. Now, if you propose an idea, and they select like 3 or 4 every year, if the idea is accepted, then you are given like a sabbatical, like you can leave the company. The company will give you actually seed money to sponsor your idea, to get you started. They will give you office space in the tower, and you will have access to legal functions and all the things that have nothing to do with actually developing the idea, but economies of scale. They have IT. They can tap into that. And then you have 2 years to launch your idea. And if your idea doesn't work, you can come back to your original job, no question asked. So I interviewed.
Where does this company exist? This is.
I can send you. I'm finishing a case study on them.
Okay.
I mean, it's mentioned in the book. It's Kordsa and Sabanji, but this is this guy that I told you about, the reinforcer, and this is very structured. So what was really impressive is how energized a particular young people in the company became when they heard about this. And even in terms of recruiting, they created like such an excitement for new talent, because you can join this company, and if you have an idea for a startup, even if it has nothing to do with the business, you can develop your own startup within the company. So I mean, again, in a sense, it's from a cultural point of view, it gives people the sense that innovation is important, that you have permission to innovate, and will make everything possible for you to express your creative side.
And like what it comes down to, the way that I'm seeing this, is that it's not only the freedom to innovate, but also freedom to fail. Because if you cultivate that comfort, that safety, that if you fail, it's still okay. There are no penalties on your career, no penalties or judgments that you've done something wrong. Then you are more and more encouraged to engage in
Yes.
innovative pursuits within the company.
So
It's really like a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
conversations that I
yeah,
have with
yeah.
people on the podcast and outside of the podcast. It comes to some kind of permitting people, giving
Yes,
them the
yes, yes,
freedom
yes, yes,
to
yes, yes,
innovate and to fail.
yes.
It's
One, yeah,
essential.
yeah. Along this line, one thing they did, like when people were actually prototyping, starting a new business, what they would do is that they would release them from, financial criteria, like
Mhm.
to actually generate, returns immediately. They would give them, I think, 4 years before, 4 to 5 years, instead of like the regular 1 or 2 year, just to give them
Mhm.
time to actually build up and scale the business. So this is another way of giving permission and making it safe to actually, not necessarily fail, but take your time to actually succeed.
It is really, really impressive. And yes, like I would love to bring somebody from that team to the podcast and share these experiences on their own, because I'm certain that there would be a lot of people who would love to learn more about that model. And before we move on, Ben, like one thing that I'm getting very curious to learn a bit more about you is about the recognition. You mentioned the recognition earlier. Uh, what are some forms of recognition that you have seen have worked both for frontline employees, other than this not with no repercussions for unsuccessful pursuits, and or pursuits that have generated less than expected results or different results? And what have been some interesting forms of incentivizing, recognizing, rewarding the middle managers? Because obviously they are like the middle layer between the leadership and the executors of innovating projects. And so if we don't empower the middle layer properly to become the catalyst, instead of remaining or acting as permafrost of innovating,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
we haven't done much. And so
yeah.
I would love to learn from you, what have been some practical or innovative ways of incentivizing and rewarding the middle management leaders as well, along with frontline
Yeah.
employees? Because I'm certain
So
they require different kinds of
yeah.
motivators.
Well, what I want to also do is to actually try to make sure to reframe the thing. I mean, we're not talking about innovation. We're talking about innovating.
The process of
The
making
process,
innovation
the
happen.
process, the process, and the culture. Huh?
Exactly.
And here, what I'm always fighting against, and I told you I was in the process of helping a company do that right now, is that senior leaders tend to, I don't know, I like to say they're too greedy. They think that the people are going to be trained, and they can develop like something immediately, And I kind of remind them, you don't climb the Mount Everest on your first time.
No.
So when I tell people, and they sometimes they push back when I train the team or the coaches, and they choose a project to work on, they want to kind of, change the bank. I mean, these guys are bankers. They want to change the business of the bank. And I said, no, 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 no. That's a double punch. You're trying to create a new business, and at the same time learn how to innovate and learn a new methodology or new technique. So I think it's very important to build a habit, just like you do at the gym. You don't start with putting 50 kilos. You just start with so same thing. I always advise people to actually tackle a very easy task, something that they understand, where they have good contacts with the customers, they understand well. So I think this is the same thing about building the engine. The important thing is really, to motivate people to engage, because again, innovating or innovation, you're tapping, something that has to come voluntarily. You cannot command innovation. You cannot tell people, okay, I want you to innovate. I want you. No. You have to build their muscle. It's like a muscle. So I always tell people, start small, start to bring people, put the bar very low. People say, I have this definition of innovation. I say it's about looking for new ideas that create value for a customer and for the company. And I add, systematically, to just tell people they can do it with a methodology or they can do it repeatedly. So what I insist is that the word new, a new idea, you want to put the bar very low because you want to motivate people. It's a motivational argument. If you give them a task and you expect them to revolutionize their industry, they're not going to do it. You have to build slowly. So this is how you incentivize and you build, the front line. Is that number one, as I said, and I repeat myself because I realize it's critical. Give them permission. Give them the training, give them the tools, and whenever they come up with something, even if they tried but they understand why it didn't work, acknowledge it, recognize it. Sometimes I tell people, we know that the extrinsic motivators can work. Well, you can give, I'm not against giving an award to the best team, giving them like some financial, compensation. That can work, but a little wink from your boss, or the boss, coming and tapping you on the shoulder, said, "Wow, I was so proud of you. That was a brilliant idea." I think people are very often moved by this thing. It warms their heart, especially the front line. These are people who are not expected to do this. So even if they do something and somebody says, like, I was talking about the Japanese manager, if people say thank you, or like, I'm so proud of you. You made us proud. You made the team proud. I think these are things that you can start to build. I think we're always expecting this big, driver that is going to. No, I think to build the culture, you start small. You make people feel safe, and then when they do, then they are encouraged, and then they can take bigger tasks. They want to participate. They want to do it more, and then you can amplify. If you set the expectation too high, then they may fall from higher. So make sure they don't fall from too high, and they're willing to repeat and repeat and repeat and grow and grow and grow. So I think this is where the middle managers have a very important role to play, but it's more at the human level. Again, I don't want to discuss all the financial and titles. Like, remember when I was talking about the X teams?
Correct.
For that company, the people who are top down, they participate in an initiative from the board, and they work with the board. Just having access to members of the board, having to present in front of senior leaders. These people, they don't sleep for days, and then when they make the presentation, they come home, they're proud. And I've interviewed people. They put on their business card, they put that they're ex-team leader, they're ex-team members. So just, when they participate in some of this initiative, having a recognition, having them in a newsletter, having them, present in front of everybody. We tend to maybe overestimate the financial drivers as a motivator. But I think people, if they have ideas, they want to, just being able to share your ideas creates a lot of energy. They step out of their daily routine, their job. So being able to influence the future of the company, it gives them a sense of pride. So now middle managers, I think it's a very very important one, and I think it's a little bit different from the frontline innovators, because frontline innovators, as we know, they don't conceive of themselves, like creative people. So they're very shy. No. I do my job. I know how to do my job, and but middle managers is a different story. It's a different story. I think they are leaders. They are the future leaders. So I think it's very important to make sure that they understand that innovation is a very important part of the organization, and then it is also something that they are responsible for. Maybe they're not. Maybe there's no direct effect on their salary. So I usually like to say that you don't want to punish people for not doing it, but you want to reward people who do it. So
Right.
I mean, people can get a bonus for something, but you don't want them to be punished because they didn't do it. So I think it's important to first get middle managers to understand that. Middle managers are very happy when one of their teams is selected, to present in front of the executive committee, or some of their team, because they're not the ones who innovate. We know that, right? It's not their job. They're responsible for execution. But if their unit, if members of their team are recognized for innovation, that reflects on them, right? This is what I call, give permission to innovate to your team and make other middle managers jealous. You make other people jealous because people say, oh, wow, your team seems to be very innovative. How are you doing this? So you create some emulation, if you will. You have companies that have, I mentioned about Allianz, for instance, where they created a formal incentive system, but it's not monetary. Yeah. So they simply created a league table. This was in the UK operations. They created in the UK. They would have the list of all the operations within the UK, and they would have a league table of the most innovative to the least innovative, and this would be published. So you can imagine peer pressure, reinforcement. So it's like social pressure. So you have that, and of course, the whole notion of being recognized, and especially at the senior level. I mean, you can see that the examples I was giving you earlier, if you come up with an idea and you have the prospect of actually heading that idea, being the leader of that experiment, or even if some new business is created, being the head of that new business, is a very strong motivator. Now, when it comes to incentives, formal incentives, I always warn people not to put the incentives on the front line, because that would be the best way to kill innovation. Is that if people whose job it is not initially to do that, and you give them permission, but then you tell them that you are sanctioning them for that, it will freeze everything. I think the incentives have to be on the middle managers, not on the front line. It is the responsibility of the middle managers to create the atmosphere, to create the habit, through processes, for their teams to keep innovating.
But then how do you reward the frontline innovators? So if you incentivize the middle managers to set up the innovating process for their team, oversee it, support in delivering results, which means experimentation, testing, trials and errors before they solidify something new, then how do we reward the employees on the front line who ideate and solve? Of course, what I'm seeing from my research is that there's no bigger reward than their idea being implemented and evolved into
Right.
a solution.
Right.
There's no bigger motivator and reward than embedding this into some career progression. So they know that there's something in it for them, into
Yeah.
their daily responsibilities and job description. So how do we reward effectively the innovators on the front line? And
I
what
mean,
I'm seeing here, like there might be some sort of difference of ex post and ex ante incentives for both. Maybe the middle managers can be incentivized more ahead of the process, while the frontline employees can be incentivized or rewarded after innovating or engaging with an innovating process.
my experience is again, we're talking about frontline employees, and it is totally understandable that some people are not interested. They don't want to get engaged. They just want to do their job. So
Mm-hmm,
it's not about enforcing or forcing people to do this. It's really tapping into this capability that people have that the organization is not tapping. So it's like this slack that exists, is that these people, they do their job. And actually, even sometimes people, tell me, it's like, I interview some middle managers and say, how can you allocate some of your frontline people to a project? I thought they were busy. They didn't have enough time. They're always
mm-hmm,
complaining, not enough time. But they realize that, in fact, if they have the opportunity to get engaged, those people who are interested into an exciting project where they can meet other people, they can do some new stuff and all that. They find the time, they
oh,
find the energy. They are actually thrilled and excited by that. It brings something in their work life that they don't have. It's like very often it's more fun. They get to spend time with customers. They get exposed to senior leaders. So getting involved in itself is already a motivator,
mm-hmm,
and so that now I have no issue with, especially if an idea pans out, to give people some bonus, some financial kind of trigger. Another one which is also important is that people will quickly realize that the people who participated in some of these kind of projects seem to be being promoted faster or doing much better. So if suddenly people kind of, it goes very quickly. People read the signals, that people who are on the innovating side actually kind of get better responsibilities. They move faster in the organization. I think people will read the signal very quickly.
mm-hmm,
Um, so it's all a question of creating a sense that it is part of your job. You may not be measured on that, but it is part of your job. I mean, it's very easy in a year end of year review to just kind of congratulate people for their contribution. Maybe they didn't do a project internally, but they agreed to participate as a member to an innovation team in another division. But this being recognized, I think, will encourage them to engage more in that. And I think for middle managers, I think it's really the recognition from the top. Recognize them that not only this is something that we expect from you, but when it is done, I mean, them also getting a very strong signal that they're valued for that. That this is something that they're recognized and even maybe get a bonus for it. I mean, there's some companies that put a portion of the bonus, connected to how much new business they created. I mean, you can these things I'm not worried about. I'm not worried about finding some technical kind of
mm-hmm,
incentive. I think I'm more interested in the subtle. It's like I was telling you about the thank you.
correct.
Those very subtle messages that people pick very quickly and they become a cultural meme, a cultural element. I think this is more important. I think that once people feel that this is something normal, people walk around, they do their job, they see stuff, they talk to customers, they see stuff that they have ideas. It's free. It's like I used to. One thing I learned about working, on the automobile industry in Japan in the old days, when we had the quality movement. There was a
Okay.
quality movement, and there was like this whole thing, because I remember coming back and talking to people, making, presentations here. People wanted to know how does Toyota do quality, and they had all these people who were overlooking, the work of others and all that, and I would come back and I say, I don't understand. Toyota they have a word. They say quality is free. Quality is free. It's free because it's embedded in the behavior of people. If people do their job, do whatever they do in the spirit of quality, you don't have to pay for quality. It's embedded. It's ingrained.
That could be the reason why Toyotas remain one of the most reliable vehicles in both sides of the Atlantic. And in my recent trip to Sri Lanka, they're pretty present. Their vehicles are pretty present on the street in Colombo too.
So quality, they breathe it. It's part of, right? Now we can talk about how they got there, but that's a different conversation. But so for me, people are doing their job and they're having ideas all the time. So for me, innovating, or the innovating mind of the people is free. It's there.
Exactly. I see.
It's just like, how do you get people to speak up and to share their ideas and share them with others, and of course at some point become more sophisticated, learn how to explore and build their capability. Like you go to the gym, in the beginning you can't lift a lot, and then after a few months, using equipment, by the way, you're using tools, you strengthen your muscle. So same thing, using tools, using training, you can strengthen your innovating muscle, and then you build the capability of the company. So I think this is the same metaphor for me. Is if you start with the notion that innovation is free, it's a capability that is in the head of your frontline, people. It's just a question of how do you tap it.
Yeah, and like as you were talking earlier about the enjoyment part, that intrinsic motivator of people, it really made me think how, as humans, many of us, we love when we're part of something bigger than what we are currently at it.
Yes.
So when you embed this mindset, this culture in your organization, you give people a chance to choose if they want to be part of something bigger than their daily responsibilities.
Yes.
Free for them to engage. You reward them if something works out, but you don't punish them. You don't penalize if things don't work out. But you give people chance to bring their whole self into that working state. Because at the end of the day,
I like what you just said, is that they bring their own self, because this is maybe better than doing your execution job. When you're doing innovating, you bring your own self. This is your identity. There's something that you see or perceive from the customer that nobody else would perceive.
Yeah.
So and it is also a very idiosyncratic capability of the company. This cannot be copied. I just want to make sure that people don't misunderstand. What I'm talking about is that it's not that people are going to to spend their time doing this. It's just saying that again, I can totally see, and I've seen people spending maybe 90%, 95% of their time doing the execution job. But you want to make sure that they understand that they are allowed to spend 5%, however small that is, but they are allowed to spend some time exploring things, looking for things, going to, it can be simply spending an hour every month with a customer, but not with the purpose of of selling them something, but a purpose of learning about them. And that is for me already innovating. That counts for innovating.
Yeah.
So it's just a question of people learning that that space is allowed for them, that if they want more, we can give them more training, and yeah, and they're not going to be punished for that. But the important thing is the consistency. For it to become a habit, they should be able, even if it's like once every 2 months, but it should be once every 2 months. And
Oh, yes.
that's where the role of the middle managers is very important, is to make sure the process, I mean, here for me, the hero is not the super innovator genius. The hero is the process. You build a process, and there are people who are overlooking the process. These are the middle managers, and they have to make sure that, oh, have you done, something on innovating this month? Oh yeah, I spent 2 hours with a team over there. So and then it can be very, very informal, but it has to be consistent.
Because at the end of the day, that innovation capability that a lot of organizations and leaders will aspire, as you rightly highlighted, to start small, it is a compound of effect of a lot of small initiatives that led to it, a lot of thank yous, a lot of recognitions, a lot of permissions, a lot of learnings along the way, and then a lot the space uh to it's a result of pursuing a lot of curiosities, because
Yes.
curiosity is human. And this is bringing me to the next question, which is one of the questions that I love unpacking with all of my guests, and
Yeah.
that is the AI and the
Oh,
space.
yeah.
How are we bringing AI into the process of innovating? Because for the time being, I don't think that AI tools bring the curiosity in the space. The curiosity remains an innate human capability. And it's
Yeah.
the curiosity to see what if, what next, what would happen if I do it this way? What would happen if I go and engage with this customer in this way? That is not an AI job. That is a human job. But from where you stand in supporting your students and your customers with your clients with innovating process capabilities building, where do you see the AI coming into creating, integrating, and reframing levels of innovation engine? Do you see it as an obstacle? Do you see it as a tool? Do you see it as an accelerator? Do you see AI in a totally different light within the realm of the innovating engine?
I don't see it as an obstacle or a problem. I think it's fantastic. It's great. But as I always say, is that I mean, bad metaphor, but the rich will get richer, and the poor will get poorer. So I think people who know how to use it will become much better. People who misuse it will get in trouble. So for me, there's something, so like, for instance, I mean, now I've been training people, and one of the key thing, as you understand, is for innovating is to I call it looking for problems in the life of the customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Finding problems.
so finding problems, huh? And then you try to solve those problems. First, it's about finding a problem that nobody knew about. Like, I call it a weak signal.
Mm-hmm.
So innovation is about looking for weak signals. So now AI can help you find the strong signals potentially, but the weak signals very often they require curiosity, as you say, but they are more in the intangible language. Is not something that they will speak about. It could be a silence. It could be so what I insist when I train these people is that I tell them innovating is about understanding your customer, and it's all about collecting data.
Okay.
Data. It's all about data, and as rich data as you can about the whole life of your customer. So when we talk about data, AI is fantastic with data. But the thing is that you have to feed it data. And that data has to come from you. It has to come from the humans. It has to, to understand, what the customer didn't say.
Mm-hmm.
AI
That's
cannot
not digitized
understand.
information.
It's not digitized information. Like you talked about tacit knowledge. They have tacit knowledge. If you so how is AI going to pick that up? So I think that AI will help once you collect data. And I tell them, whatever you can find on AI, get it, bring it. So, and then the challenge is to go beyond AI, what AI doesn't tell you. So AI is fine. I don't have any problem with it. But then you have to also be the one who has the judgment. The problem is that AI will not have the judgment. AI cannot tell you which data to trust, which one not to trust. AI doesn't help you collaborate. So I think that AI is fantastic, but we have to be careful how to use it. And I think the real capabilities that are critical for me, technology. The thing is that technology is changing much faster than human capabilities are changing. So I'm not worried about technology, and will be always there as a support. The only thing I want to always be careful about is that by using technology, we don't speed up the mess.
Don't
No, I
speak
had
up.
I had I had somebody who was in the era of EDI. You remember when there was like interchange between companies using electronic data interchange. I had
Mm-hmm.
actually his name is Ben Bensaou. He was my advisor at MIT. He used to say, people make the mistake sometimes to take existing processes and use technology to speed up the mess. If you don't rethink the processes in a way that leverages the technology, you're just speeding up the mess. You're just sending more data faster, but the processes are wrong. So this is where AI can have give people the illusion that they're doing something different, but in fact they're just speeding up the mess. If you have a bad process with AI, it's not going to become a good process.
No.
So that's if you have bad judgment, AI is not going to fix your judgment. It's going to give
No.
you more data. So for me, AI is a fantastic tool for people who have good judgment, good curiosity, who know how to listen with empathy. So it's great. I mean, it's a great compliment. But I think thinking that it will solve your innovation problem, I think is also very dangerous. And I think there might be, whenever we have technology, at some point that this romantic belief that it will fix my problems. No, your problems are still the same. It will support in some areas, and that's all. So when it comes to like, I like your word curiosity, judgment, knowing what to trust. And again, I like to believe that innovation is also a team sport. You have
Mm-hmm.
to do it with people
Oh, yes.
coming from different perspectives, having different sensitivities, people who have a different experience of the customer. So if AI can support that, fine, but it might not necessarily systematically do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I say in my teachings, to my students, you can invent on your own, but you cannot innovate on your own, because
Yeah.
when you take invention into the market, which means that it starts creating value to the others,
Yes.
people engage with that invention, and there's a
Yes.
business
Yes.
model that distributes that invention to the people.
Yes.
Then you can have
Yes.
innovation.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yes,
Yes. Yes.
if you feel comfortable inventing on your own, go ahead. But at some point,
Yes.
you
Yes.
need to
Yes.
start
Yes. Yes. Yes.
collaborating with
Well,
others.
actually, I can give you an example of what I had this conversation with this team in this bank that I'm helping right now, right? So, as a way to understand the issues that customers might have, I kind of suggested to them, why don't you go and spend 30 minutes at the call center, right? Call center, and get headsets and listen to 30 minutes of a conversation, at the call center.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So just listening to the complaints or what the customers are saying on the call center is fantastic. And then they came back. They said, I had asked them, if you can't do it, just get a recording. And then they came back and said, well, not only we have recording, but we have thousands of hours of recording if we want to. So now I tell them, if you get those recordings, get AI to analyze this for you. This is data. This is fantastic data. AI, because, I asked them to listen and to detect three things: what the customer doesn't like, what the customer likes, and what the customer dreams of. And then we do something about this, right? But so they got really excited because now you can use AI, but they missed the point that if you don't have the data, the raw data coming from a conversation, a human conversation with a customer, you can do this with bots, but with a customer, when they listen, they hear the tone of the customer. They hear, when they are angry, when they are smiling, when they that AI, no, not yet.
Because as you rightly said, AI is not going to capture the customer's silence as one. And then you referred to this bit peripherically earlier in the conversation, but when you go and observe the client in their potential customer in their working space, you are going to recognize friction that they have normalized.
Yes.
As humans, when we are so ingrained in things that we do, when we get so accustomed to solving some of our own micro problems, we are not going to recognize that there might be a better solution to that one. So we will continuously try do the thing in the same way. But then somebody else comes and observe us silently in a shadow or during an ethnographic observation. They can capture those friction moments that we did not. And so those are the opportunities. That's the problem finding or problem scouting, as I'm processing all this, that AI cannot do. AI is still going to be amazing to process the existing information. But as you highlighted, it has to be clean data. It has to be good data, because garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yes.
And even if you get that information from the AI, even the AI tools, they know that only 50% of the outputs are accurate. So you cannot trust that 100%. So the more you use AI, if you're using it effectively, the more you're sharpening your own judgment and critical thinking. And that's what I'm liking with AI. Learning to say no to the AI outputs and learning to say yes and edit and learning how to work with the AI. And the more you want the AI to serve you, the more critical and clearer you want to be on what you want. And you want, when you understand what's wrong going on, that needs to be solved or needs a different kind of output. So I'm really glad that you highlighted some of these things, but especially like that, learn which data to trust and which ones not to trust. I think that's very important to go. Ben, we're coming close to our conversation, and I'm sad that we have to conclude now because I feel like you and I can talk for hours. But before I let you go to the rest of your evening, hopefully a sunny evening in Fontainebleau, I would love to learn from you after this lifetime in engineering, innovating, and teaching and supporting companies with building their own capabilities. I'm certain that there must be a question that you don't have an answer to yet. And I would love for you to find one of those questions and then share those with the audience so that we see what the audience can share from their tacit and explicit knowledge in relation to that question. So what would that question be?
Yeah, I think this is something we already discussed, and I guess if people have stories or examples or suggestions, beyond what we talked about, I think this is kind of the key. If we can, find the key to this problem, it would help a lot of organizations. It's really about the middle managers. It's really how do you unlock the thermofrost, because everybody tells me that, I told you I do the audit for, with Frontline, and people have lots of ideas. They're really excited about their ideas. And then when I share this with the senior leaders, they're completely shocked. I tell them, your organization is very innovative. People are really excited. And then when we start to try to understand what's going on, everybody kind of realizes that it just stops. It just stops at the middle management level. So I think the key question, and I'd love to hear stories about that, is how do you, unlock the middle management? How do you kind of get the middle management to support that, to give time for their people to innovate, not necessarily like in a kind of incentive mode, but how do you kind of build that into the organization? I mean, if people have any ideas, I would love to hear that.
I love the question. I really love this question, and I'm so curious to see what are we going to learn from the audience. Ben, merci beaucoup for coming to the conversation today. I'm so grateful that I've had the chance to connect with you, to continue to learn about innovating capabilities from you. And I look forward to a lot of conversations like this. And I wish you a lot of good luck in everything that you do.
Thank you, Iliana, and thank you, everybody. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Ben showed us that the innovating engine is not theoretical. It is very concrete, it is very practical, it is very doable. Platforms like Buyers we solve, where employees post problems and source solutions across functions. Companies like Kordsa, where employees can pitch startup ideas, take sabbaticals, and return to their jobs regardless of whether the startup took off or not. These are not perks. These are elements of an innovating engine that companies build on their own. Engines that permit anyone inside the company to step into repeatedly to ideate, test, and innovate. They were not procured from a vendor. They were not outsourced to a partner. They were custom built by visionary leaders inside these organizations. So if you're a leader, you can borrow them as a model. You can borrow other models to inspire your own. But at the end of the day, each company has to build its own innovating engine. And this is the other side of enterprise coin. Before we close, Ben shared a question for you all. He's curious to know if you had an idea or wanted to innovate in your organization, would you know where to go? Would you feel you had permission? Would anyone say thank you for taking the risk to share it? The question is a simple way to tell whether your organization has built that innovating engine that will activate you as a potential innovator, or whether it's performing an innovation theater. So Ben wants to hear from you. I want to hear from you. Comment below, send a DM, or record a video message. And if today's conversation sparked your curiosity to learn about how you might start building your own innovating engine, visit opensolvestudio.com. That's exactly what we do. We help leaders with or without innovation in title to activate internal innovators, generate innovative solutions internally, and build innovation capabilities that last. I'm your host, Ileriana Caccianico, and this is Activate Innovation Lounge. Until next time, stay curious and keep activating.